Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you all for coming out this morning on this rainy day to celebrate our first Saturday seminar of the year. If you don't know me, my name is Marissa Blackburn. I am holding this for our recording, so my voice should not be projected. Don't worry if I'm not speaking louder. I am the Environmental Education Manager here at Cape Fear River Watch, and I appreciate you guys all spending the morning with us today. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple Cape Fear River Watch updates, and then I will turn it on over to some folks who will be introducing our speakers for today. A couple updates. We always like to shout out our board members in the audience. So if you're a board member, I'm going to ask you to stand today. Larry, can you stand? Byron Toothman, Paul Smith, and Jason Rogers, if you could stand. Thank you guys all for being board members. And long time, yes, came for the pancakes. And then long-time past board member Jeannie Lennon is also here in the audience. There she is over there. Thank you for all your support over the years. And one of our longest time members, Tom Toohey, over here in the front. So thank you for your support. A couple updates for some programs coming up. Next Saturday, we will have our second Saturday seminar for January. We will be cleaning up, our cleanup. Well, you're here at the seminar. Our cleanup next Saturday is going to be at McCumber's Branch portion of Burnt Mill Creek, the northern side of Wilmington. So join us for that if you're able. We also have in the beginning of February, on February 2nd, a film screening of the documentary Burned about PFAS in firefighting gear. Dana's here, and she can tell you lots more about that if you're interested or have questions. But that's going to be at Django's Playhouse on this February 2nd at 7:30 p.m. And a quick reminder, our year-end fundraiser ended, but there's always time still to donate money to the Cape Fear River Watch, your favorite environmental nonprofit. So you're welcome to do that after, or we also have a donation jar in that front room if you're feeling generous. All right, well, with that, I'm going to turn it on over to our board member, Larry, who will be introducing our first speaker of the day, Byron.
Hi there. Yeah, don't mind my limping. It's a real pleasure to introduce Byron. I've known him for many, many years, first as an undergraduate student. He came to UNCW from Carteret County, where he spent a great deal of his formative years on the water doing various kinds of things. And we'll leave it at that. He was actually born near Washington, D.C. He came to UNCW as an undergraduate and eventually earned degrees in marine biology and environmental science. It was called environmental studies then. He has moved around back and forth. He came back to UNCW after a stint in Florida working on aquaculture, shrimp aquaculture, and earned a master's degree in marine science from UNC Wilmington. He caught the bug and somehow decided that more schooling was appropriate for him, and is now close to finishing a doctoral dissertation in our marine biology PhD program. Very close, right. We can smell the defense coming, so, right, and he's done a fabulous piece of work. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Byron. He'll explain to you what he does.
All right. Do you need to turn the mic on still?
It should be on already.
Oh, it's on already?
Need me to recreate all that? Okay. So the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. Currently, we have 30 other reserves around the coastal states, including recently Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and in lower Alaska. Might be able to tell Louisiana sticks out. I think that's really amusing. But they are on the plan, as well as another reserve in Green Bay. We also have a freshwater reserve system up there in Minnesota. Let's see. All right. The rules and regulations that establish the Coastal Reserve and the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. First was the Coastal Zone Management Act, which established the reserves. And then I'm not going to read all of these because they're awful and I don't like them. If you move down to the what everybody calls CAMA, that formally established the Coastal Reserve, which is the North Carolina affiliate of that. And so it's really a state and federal partnership. And this graphic kind of like shows how these elements come together to create the Coastal Reserve. We get about 70% or so of our funding from the federales, and when we pay on time, the state gives us another 30% or so. To further complicate that, Elizabeth and I work at UNCW. Elizabeth is actually a DCM employee. I am actually a UNCW employee. And so when either one of us does something wrong, there are 4 to maybe 5 people that come and inform you what you did incorrectly. Here are some of the reserve goals. Essentially what it is to provide these natural areas along the coast, these estuarine systems and properties that we manage to sort of serve as a baseline for our work to keep track of the effects of land use change. And we also we encourage other people to perform their research there. We have an extensive environmental monitoring program, which is growing all the time. And about 60% of what I do is to run the system-wide monitoring program, or what we call it SWMP, which I think is a little unfortunate. But I always put this plot here, which Larry is very familiar with. It's probably difficult to read, but what that does is it establishes a link between microbial water quality, or fecal coliform concentrations, and the amount of impervious surface coverage in a watershed. And so you can see this is an unusually straight line for environmental data. It's very impressive. And what it shows you is that as you start paving things and creating more impervious infrastructure, you start to degrade the water quality. And the reason I put this in here is to remind us all, which I'm sure few of us need reminding, that what we do on the land impacts the water. So the Coastal Reserve has 4 main programs: education, research, stewardship, and a coastal training program. We go into elementary schools, and we have a dedicated education coordinator who is in charge of making sure that what we do is communicated and integrated into educational programs. I'm a part of the research program and running SWMP, and then Elizabeth is a part of the stewardship program. She is the site coordinator for all of our southern sites and does a lot of the main stewardship responsibilities at this time. And then our coastal training program, that coordinator is responsible for creating workshops and making sure, sort of tailoring our outreach instruments to community needs. So one of the things Whitney does really well is sort of things like putting together workshops that inform the real estate community of some of the coastal hazards and things like that. It's a very valuable part of what we do. We are unique among the other national NERS programs in that we have so many components. We have we have 4 state components, or federal components: Rachel Carson up in Beaufort, Masonboro and Zeke's, which is where I spend most of my time, and then Currituck Banks, and the rest are the state-owned properties, and we try to manage them all. It's very challenging. We have 3 offices, and we have a unique set of challenges with all of that. All right, so digging further in to the system-wide monitoring program, what it does is it's attempting to establish a long-term monitoring network across all of the reserves. And so at every single reserve, there's hopefully more than one, but 1 to maybe 4 or 5 people just like me. There's 2 in our office, my compatriot Heather Wells, if you have ever met her. We run the SWMP program exactly the same as all the other reserves. We've developed a strict set of data management protocols. We use the exact same equipment, and like every good magician, I brought props. This is one of the instruments that we use for monitoring water quality. This is a YSI EXO SON. Welcome to come and take a look at it later. And then we collect all this data, and it goes through a multi-step QA/QC process to make sure that every data point is validated. It's really intense. I look at every single data point no fewer than 4, as many as 5 or 6 times before it is actually labeled authenticated data. And all this data is put online. It's available for anybody to use. If you'd like to look at it, I'm happy to help you sift through it, how to look at it, look for different events that may have happened. I try to work with educators to make sure that they can incorporate this data into their work. I try to work with elected officials and decision makers and help them understand the data that we're collecting and what we're seeing happening out there, how the decisions that they're making may impact our environment. And then my favorite part is working with other researchers. I've been at UNCW for a long time, off and on. I've gotten to know a lot of people there. And one of my favorite things is to go down the hall and figure out, okay, you're doing this kind of research. Let me help you with what we're doing. One of the most valuable things about this, and this is one of our water quality stations right here. Unfortunately, that's not a picture of from the river. That's from Masonboro Sound. But we're collecting all of this data, and it's already paid for. We provide it for free. I've watched people over and over decide, okay, I want to investigate this scientific problem. I need to go out, collect some background data. You're going to invest time, you're going to invest your hard-earned research dollars, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to spend money on equipment that's very, very expensive. And what I encourage people to do is site their work close enough to our stations that we can provide all of this environmental data at no cost to you. Spend your time, spend your money and your effort doing the things that are more meaningful, investigating the problems that you're actually an expert in. So drilling down further still, this is our Zeke's Basin site. This is, I just refer to this as the basin, but that's the wildlife ramp there by the Fort Fisher Ferry Terminal. We have a water quality station there, a water quality station there. We also have a weather station at, over in Masonboro that we use. All of these stations are collecting water quality data at the exact same 15-minute increments of time, intervals. The exact same thing is happening at every other SWMP station around the nation. So when you download this data, let's say you want to compare what's happening here on the East Coast to something on the West Coast. When you download these files, all of these lines of data line up perfectly for you. You don't have to spend as much time doing what data scientists call cleaning. You can spend more of your time snooping. I didn't start this job wearing glasses, but now, you know, it's from looking at all that data. I decided to show you a picture that gives you a sense of scale. This is my weather station. I have to climb up there a couple of times a year to trade out instruments. And you might not be able to resolve this, but that's an antenna, a Yagi antenna that sends all the data we collect to the GOES, or the HADS satellite constellation. So all of this goes to satellite. Then it comes back down to Earth where it's hosted online. There's our telemetry system there that sends the satellite data to satellite. That pole right there is where all of these instruments are housed. And then what you end up with all of these lines of data. And recently I tallied up about what we get every year. Depends on whether there's a leap year or not. 2.37 million individual data points. That's collected across the year every 15 minutes 8 parameters for water quality and I think 10 parameters for weather, 4 stations that are national stations, so on and so on. I look at every single data point and validate it, Heather, Wells, or I, but it's usually both of us. And then we go through and try and make sure we can explain weird things that are happening. All this data is hosted online. You're welcome to come and check this out. This is the Central Data Management Organization, CDMO. And then you can do fun things with it, like plot dissolved oxygen and temperature and see what kind of trends are happening there. Don't want to spend any time on the data that we see, but we're generating a lot of data. And one of the first questions that a sensible person would ask is, what do you do with it? All right, so there's all kinds of things that can be done. With data that's collected every 15 minutes, you've got a relatively fine time scale, fine resolution on what's being collected. Other monitoring programs I've been a part of have been really pleased about being able to go out once a month or, gosh, once a week and then process all those samples. It's very intense. But what this allows you to do is look at trends and events across multiple timescales. So here's an example of something I've talked with Larry about, which I just thought this was great. I believe it was 2018. This is what some of the output of our station at UNCW looks like. If you look right here, this is the depth parameter. So you can see that there's a nice little tide going on here, up and down and up and down. It's very regular. But then there's that weird blip. Well, in reality, what that blip represents is while the tide was at the fastest part of its cycle, flooding Masonboro Sound, all of a sudden it switched directions and increased by about a foot. If you were down, there was a nasty storm going on at this particular evening, but if you had been down at the dock, you would have been able to see all the water get stirred up, all the bottom get stirred up. That must have been one hell of a current that did that. And then on its way out, what amounts to a wave, on its way out, it fought the incoming tide again. And I sent this to Larry right away. I thought, what in the hell is this? And he had a good idea, and it's been corroborated by several other physical oceanographers that it's a trapped wave along the coast. I thought, well, when am I going to see this again? Well, it turns out I saw it again on March of last year, same thing, and then again a couple months later. So I thought that was pretty cool. And what's happening is a pressure system is moving off the coast. It's moving very quickly. And just like if you were in a bathtub and you scooted backwards really quickly, it creates a wave going the other direction, moving south, and it's trapped along the coast. It keeps bending towards the shallower water of the continental shelf. And it's a really, I keep talking about it like a wave, but if that's what it is. It's a very, very large, long period wave. And then I checked with some of the other CORMP stations that monitor water level up and down the coast. And time-wise, you could see it propagating down the East Coast. Each of these went as far as Georgia. Here's another use of our data on a much, much bigger time scale. We've been doing this since, in North Carolina, we've been doing the water quality monitoring for longer than almost everybody else. Our data goes back to 1988, 1989. I'd say that with confidence, we've got really good data beginning about 2002. So with a time span that long, you can start to look at how some of these larger global patterns begin to influence what we see on the ground. And this is some work by Steve Rummerl, who is out of Oregon. He's since retired. But he started linking a lot of the water quality parameters that we've got, the data that we're seeing, to the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is a atmospheric oceanic oscillation, similar to El Nino, if you're familiar with that. Here's another case of us using our data. We got a call one day, and somebody said, there's been a fish kill over on Masonboro. So we hopped in our boat. We decided to go take a look at it. And this ended up being an interesting forensic example. So we showed up, all three of us in our office, to Masonboro, and these lines of debris on the beach are not shells, they're fish. And they all had this sort of, their menhaden, sort of this uniformly surprised look on their face. But this is pretty much what we saw. Is patches in the water like that, some scattered down the beach. It looked like a lot of fish. I was guessing maybe a few to maybe 10,000 fish. So we had a water quality station nearby. I decided, well, let's go pull that data. Went and got the sonde. That's our Lucent Creek station. This sort of yellow hashing is the area, all of the areas where we saw fish. We didn't see fish anywhere else, just there. And that's in Masonboro Sound. There's Masonboro Inlet. Wrightsville Beach would be right there, if you get your bearings. So I pulled the data, and we saw this huge drop in dissolved oxygen. That's this green stuff here. It went down to near zero. This is pH. That also dipped. And then there's the tide. All that happened at the high tide point. Now, I'm going backwards, but this is where we see all the fish. It was right here, and my water quality station is upstream of that. So I was immediately perplexed. Like, why am I seeing the signal when it's upstream, relative to that tide we were seeing? So we sent somebody. DCM has an airplane that you can send out to go do reconnaissance. We took advantage of that. Hope Sutton got in the air. Regular 35mm camera, and she was able to see all of these whitish areas here are not sand. That's menhaden. All of it. And this is what, when we went back to take another look and investigate, what we found is this is all menhaden. This is up in the marsh, not in the water. That was, many places there were knee deep in dead fish. Crazy. We never would have found that, though, if we didn't have that data to go back and figure out. And what was going on, we determined, was that, I don't know if you know menhaden well. They're a little skittish. And they're a schooling fish. And they will work their way up into these tidal creeks. And their fight or flight response is always flight-ish. And they school more tightly. And this was in the wintertime. They schooled really tightly. I think this was probably on the order of millions of fish. They got into such a tight ball, they sucked up all the oxygen. They're all breathing. They sucked up all the oxygen, which is why you see that dip in oxygen, and they suffocated themselves. And then they died. It was high tide. Many of them floated up in the river. There's a really strong current there, tidal current. When it left, it brought everything that was in the water out the inlet. So we were able to use our data to figure out what was going on there. Another example, Hurricane Florence. Many of us lived through this. That blue dot is me living through this in my bedroom by myself with 2 quivering dogs, terrified. And what you can't see here, which I'm really pleased about, is that's the eye. And right there's my weather station. The eye went perfectly over my weather station. And I have the lowest recorded barometric pressure for that storm. Here's some of the data that we got back from it. Masonboro. This is the depth data, so this is like, we can see our tidal surge. We had maybe 5 or 6 feet there. Lower Cape Fear, that's the Zeke Basin Station. There's not much tide there, or not much storm surge. Well, the reason was, if you take a look at this storm, as it came in, it's blowing water in this direction. But down at the river, as it came in, it's blowing water south. It's pushing that water out the river. If you were downtown and took a look around, downtown was flooded, but that was from all the rain in the upper watershed. That was not as much stormwater surge. Here is the salinity for Cape Fear. It goes from, we were coming off of a little bit of a drought, and then, so it's getting more saline, that's seawater, and then, pew. I have never seen any of our stations that low before or since. So it was nearly fresh water for about a week before it started coming back up. We didn't see that response at Masonboro at all. We saw it go down, all that rainwater, but even then it got into like the 5, 10, 15 parts per thousand range, and then started coming back up. That's up and down. You can see that's the tide, bringing in seawater, taking out fresh water. another example of what we can do with our science. And this gets into, this starts to become more personal because this is what led me to my dissertation work. So I'm looking through all this data, as I do every year, quarterly, annually, all that stuff. And I have to look at the data and see what makes sense. So seawater typically has a pH usually less than 8.5 in an estuary where we are. So you can see that this is the pH going up and down, up and down, up and down. Then there's just a handful of data points there and there that are above 9. That's kind of unrealistic. There was a person that had my job before me, and when she would go through the data, she would also knew that doesn't make any sense. She would say that's an unexplained error. She'd kick out all that data. I thought, well, why is that? But because we have to look at all this stuff at the same time, I started recognizing that there were some weather patterns that were happening. There would be, it would be wintertime. It would be a time when there was no wind. I looked through the data more closely, and I started seeing more of these points above 9. Never more than like 30 minutes, 45 minutes at a time. So I started realizing, oh, there's a freshwater lens that's forming on top of the water surface. And then that's preventing an equilibrium with the atmosphere. There must be a lot of photosynthetic activity, but what would do that? So if you're not familiar with the carbonate cycle, what happens is when you've got plants, algae, seaweeds, things like that in the water, they're photosynthesizing. They're taking carbon dioxide out of the water. They're using sunlight, and they're creating their own food, photosynthesis, right? So they take, they're fixing carbon. They're essentially removing carbon dioxide from the water, which forms carbonic acid. So that's responsible for keeping the pH where it is. It's a little bit complicated, and I won't go into it further than that. But if you're removing the acid from the water, acid lowers the pH. That naturally causes the pH to rise. And I can tell that it's a photosynthetic issue or driver because this is our dissolved oxygen. Dissolved oxygen was getting here in the 240% saturation, 240% saturation. So normally, our DO would be right around this area. That's extraordinary. So I was like, what's causing all of this? And at the same time, I was also realizing we're getting these blooms of an invasive algae called Gracilaria vermiculophila. It comes from the west coast of the Pacific. You may have seen it. This is one of Larry's other graduate students, Aaron Ramus, and it grows like this. And then it breaks free. It forms these big rafts of drift alga that, you know, they wash ashore. The unusual thing about it is that it's incredibly hardy. It tolerates a wild range of temperatures and salinities. It's really difficult to kill this stuff. I put it in my fridge once, and it was still alive like 6 months later. I'm not even kidding. So that's what was driving that pH signal. Well, I continued to be interested in this stuff, and I was realizing that it's starting to form these big mats that are eroding the shoreline. And you can kind of see it there. This is what happens when one of those mats gets ripped away. That's a bunch of shell matter that's been exposed. And then there's this pink, purple sulfur oxidizing bacteria there. I was like, man, that must be changing the water quality. If it's doing that to the dissolved oxygen, what's going on inside these mats? And I started to think, well, one of the things that happens in anoxic areas when there's little oxygen is you can have all of these, is representative of the microbe system that lives beneath the sediment. So right below the surface of the sediment, the oxygen gets used up really quickly, and you've got these anaerobic bacteria that do all kinds of stuff. One of those things, or one of those microbes, is a class of bacteria called sulfur-reducing bacteria, sulfate-reducing bacteria. And they take sulfate, which is found in seawater, and they use that to produce their own food, or to metabolize all the things that they need to stay alive. One of the things they do on the side, it's like their side hustle, is they're able to take mercury and turn it into methylmercury. Methylmercury, if you're not sure or haven't heard of it before, that's the mercury that accumulates in our tuna. That's what gets into our food web. That's what contaminates us. That's what causes all kinds of neurological damage. It's incredibly toxic, and there's no safe level. So I thought, what can we use as a sentinel organism to see if this is going on there. If this is creating conditions that are very similar to the mudflat, to what's in the dirt, then maybe we'll see that mercury getting into the animals that live there. So what you can see on this mudflat here, I include this picture, is all these little snails. This is the eastern mud snail. They're scavengers. They eat everything. I figured if anything was going to pick up that signal, it would be them. And so I collected a bunch of these snails at varying distances from these algae mats. And lo and behold, really close to these algae mats, within about 10 meters, 30 feet, the mercury is an order of magnitude higher than down here. So that gave me the idea that I can go to school. I might be able to get a degree out of this. Thankfully, or Dr. Hoon did not shoot me down. All right, so this is just to let you know, or to give you an idea of how this stuff works. Mercury bioaccumulates. So at every level of the food web, it increases in concentration. So it first gets into microalgae. Primary consumers eat the microalgae, where they accumulate all the mercury that was in all of the things that they ate. And then other things eat those primary consumers, and then they accumulate all that until you're up here at this highest trophic level that does not include humans, and you've got lots of mercury. That's the end of my slides. But the reason I wanted to include my research here was because we have some related issues with the river, and that is that we have some problems with seawater intrusion and seawater moving up the river. And there's a plan now to deepen the channel. And that's going to encourage more seawater to come up. And if you recall, I mentioned that the microbes that do this mercury transformation, they're sulfate-reducing bacteria. Sulfate is a part of the salt that you get in with seawater. So upstream of the river, we have lots of freshwater wetlands that are not exposed very regularly to seawater. There's lots of organic matter that traps all the mercury that's been precipitating out of the atmosphere. Our sources of mercury are burning fossil fuels, mostly. So there's a lot, we're always pumping that in the atmosphere, and it rains out. Well, fortunately, a lot of the soils trap that mercury. So once we start introducing more seawater up the river, these pristine areas that have not been exposed to the sulfate in seawater, these microbes that live there, but they're kind of dormant, they're going to say, oh, the buffet is here. They're going to start ginning up the activity. They're going to start consuming that organic matter. They're going to start liberating a lot of that mercury into the water. And that we already have in the Cape Fear River a big mercury problem. We also have a problem, an economic problem, where there are people that have to use the river for food. We have subsistence fishers that live and eat the fish that are found here, and about three quarters of the people that fish in the river eat their fish, and they are extremely high in mercury already. So that problem is going to be exacerbated by the influx of water that comes with the port deepening. And that's it.
All right, thank you. So we're going to actually hold questions until the end because we have another speaker.
Most of her time protecting coastal ecosystems and then went to get her master's in marine biology from Nova Southeastern University in South Florida. She is passionate about coastal and sea and teaching others about our amazing coastal ecosystems. I got to work with Elizabeth and Byron when I was the shorebird tech on Masonboro Island, and it was very fun. They're both two awesome people to work with, and Elizabeth is so passionate about what she does, and that was awesome to see every day when I got to work there. So, thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah.
That would totally.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Byron. Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. Now you've seen some small, very focused things that he was just talking about right at the end. I'm gonna go a little back and look at the sites at a larger scale. So like Shauna said, my name is Elizabeth Pinnix. I'm the Southern Sites Manager for the Coastal Reserve. So Byron and I are both in our Wilmington office, our Southern office at CMS. So just to kind of remind you guys, so we manage 4 sites out of our office, Masonboro Island, Zeke's Island, Bald Head Woods, and Bird Island. So Masonboro and Zeke's are both of those federal sites that are part of the National Estuarine Research Reserve. And then Bald Head Woods and Bird Island are our state sites. We really manage them all the same. It's just the funding that's the different piece. But we do everything at all 4 of those sites with very few people. So it's a lot to do. So I'm going to talk, usually a lot of my talks are about Masonboro, but since I have such lovely River Watch people here today, I'm going to focus both on Zeke's and Bald Head Woods, which are both on the Cape Fear River. I have dates, so I don't want to forget them. Okay, so just to take us back in time, a little bit of history. Some of you may already know this, but I think this is what makes Zeke's just one of these really cool sites to be at. So on your left, you'll see a map from 1862. This clearly is not what it looks like today, right? So you'll see, make sure I don't, so you'll see here, this is Federal Point right there, and then you have an inlet called the New Inlet. Going down, you'll have Bald Head Woods, Bald Head down here at the bottom, and we're disconnected right here. This is an actual inlet, and this was the main shipping entrance to the Cape Fear River. It was not down here by Bald Head. So in 1875 to 81, the Army Corps of Engineers took on a really large project to actually create rocks and a wall that goes from Federal Point down to here to actually close off New Inlet. The reason because the Cape Fear River was receiving so much sediment influx from these channels from the Atlantic Ocean that it was shoaling and ships were running aground. So they were actually tasked with creating this rock wall, which you now know today as the Rocks, down at Zeke's. So it runs miles down the way, all the way from Federal Point. And so this actually created substantial lack of flow of water. So these rocks are keeping the water from moving through the inlet. And so now ships are forced to come up through this way, so what we know today. It changed the whole dynamic of this place, putting those the rock wall up. And so eventually the inlet ended up closing in 1990, right? 99, 98? Yeah, 19, so like relatively recently. It took that long. And historically, the area around Zeke's was actually part of a turpentine factory as well as gill netting area. But those were destroyed back in 1899. This area had a heavy military influence as well through the World War II. Most of you have probably been down to Fort Fisher and know that. You can see kind of the historical importance of this area, as well as commercial and just recreational activity, fishing, kayaking, boating. This area has been very big with fishing in the past. So since the rock wall was put up, Zeke's has had no direct influence with the Atlantic Ocean. So once that inlet closed, the only input we have is from the river. So downstream, upstream, that's all we've got. So there's a lot of exchange difference that over time has made this area just such an interesting place to research. You heard all about that, but but going back to how it is today, so the property was actually privately owned, and it was donated in 1980. And then from there, it was dedicated to the state in 1985, and that is when it became a coastal reserve property. So this is now part of our 10 sites. And it's about 1,600 acres of upland marsh, barrier beach. We actually do have the barrier beach portion too. And beautiful tidal flats, upland habitat for plenty of species. And what's really interesting is that you may go out there and think, wow, there's so much water, so many places to go, but at times, this basin area is, I mean, so shallow. Like Byron was saying the other day that at low tide you can walk out and sometimes you won't get over ankle deep. It's extremely shallow, and it's getting shallower and shallower as we go because there's no flushing to happen. So these are just a few of the pictures if you're ever down at Zeke's. So this is the rock wall that they created that separates the basin from the Cape Fear River. Over the years, it's clearly been battered. It used to be an actual structure. Now it's kind of rocks laying all over the place. So if you have a chance to go down to Zeke's, I highly recommend it. A really easy way to go see the basin is the Basin Trail that leads from the Fort Fisher State Recreation Area. It's a beautiful hike. But I'm just going to tell you guys a little bit about some of the things that we do at Zeke's. So species of concern and monitoring. So with this site, we deal with a lot of different species, animals, plants, habitats. One of the species that we focus on at Zeke's is the diamondback terrapin. So has anyone seen a diamondback terrapin? Yes? Ah, they're the cutest little marsh turtles. So they are a purely estuarine turtle, which means that they live in fresh and salt water, where fresh and salt water mix. That is the only place they're found, so it's a very small fringing habitat for them all the way from Maine into the Gulf. So they're really only found in our marsh habitats in North Carolina. So backside of Masonboro, the river is a hot spot for them. They love the river. And they have a lot of threats as well. So habitat loss. One of the big things that we're working on a lot of community science is the terrapin tally. So it's a community science event where people go out and kayak and actually document how many terrapins they see. And this has helped us understand where they are, how many there are. They're not a protected species right now. And they're a state species of special concern, which basically means we don't have enough information to actually list them as anything. So we are out and we document them, we're researching them, but a big threat that they face are getting stuck in crab pots. The crab pot fishery is very important, and it's also very prevalent at Zeke's as well as most of our other sites. So making sure that these pots are checked. We don't have ghost pots that are hanging out in the marsh where they're small enough where they go in the funnel and they have to breathe air. And so they are not able to get back out and breathe air, so they end up drowning. So that's a big threat for diamondback terrapins, but they're a really, really charismatic turtle. They're really cool if you ever get to see them. Additionally, we have shorebird nesting. So these are American oyster catchers. Really bright orange beak. You kind of can't miss them. They're usually on the beachfront. They're chicks, about yay big when they hatch, running around, falling over. So the beachfront, like I said, is usually where you'll see these nesting. We partner with really great organizations. So Fort Fisher State Park, the rangers actually manage the beachfront for us. So they do all the sea turtle monitoring and all the shorebird monitoring on the beach. So we do have American oyster catchers nesting out there, especially using it as foraging grounds. You'll find them on the rock wall. They love sitting out there and picking at all the little hard things on the rocks. And then additionally, sea turtles. So this is really crazy to me. We have had sea turtles nesting on the river side of Zeke's as well as the ocean front. It blew my mind. So they're actually coming up the river, they're hanging out in the basin, they're hanging out in the river, and they nested on the backside of Zeke's. So they're also using the beachfront, which is just remarkable. But like Byron was saying, we're getting more and more salt water moving up the river. So they're moving up with it. Maybe we'll have a turtle nesting in downtown Wilmington. Who knows? I hope not. If you see that, let me know. But we mostly have loggerhead sea turtles, occasionally a green sea turtle that'll nest. We also deal a lot with plant, and especially invasive species. So you heard about Gracilaria already. But on the land, we do have white poplar that we treat at Zeke's. It grows very quickly and it takes over the native plant. So we are out there kind of cutting, trimming, treating those, making sure we get a good handle on them, as well as documenting rare plants. So this is called the dune blue curl, and it's a small bushy plant, but it has these beautiful purple flowers on it. And it was actually first identified and found on Bald Head Island, which is, it's a state species of special concern, as well as a rare plant, and it's also found at Zeke's. So it's a really, really cool plant. We have it on the dredge spoil islands at Mason Borough, but we make sure we document these things so that we know what's there and we want to keep them there. So make sure the invasives are under control so that the native plants can thrive. We do have a lot of issues with, I mean, you guys know this, the river brings everything down to us. So seeds, whatever comes down is coming into this site. So we have to deal a lot with whatever we find and treat it. Okay, the next site I'm gonna talk about is Bald Head Island. So within Bald Head Island, there's about 190 acre tract of maritime forest, and that is Bald Head Woods Reserve. If you have not gone there, go. It is one of the most beautiful maritime forests in our state. It is the second largest, behind another one of our reserve sites up north. So you should 100% go. It's a beautiful site. We have about 3 miles of nature trails through the site, and they're all dominated by native maritime forest plants. Live oaks, laurel oaks, poplar, cedar, sable palm, and some of the live oaks have been dated to be almost 500 years old, which you stand there and just, they're beautiful. And as most of us know, that maritime forests are what keep our islands here. So their root systems, their protection from sea spray, from wind, are basically what keep our barrier islands intact. So it's really important that we keep these habitats there, just so that we can have stable places to be. Cool species, just to note, painted bunting. If you have not seen one, go find Cape Fear, Audubon, because they are just, that is the male. The female is a little more drab, of course. But the males are the pretty ones. So, but they are all over Bald Head Woods. They love the shrub thicket, dense vegetation they'll hide in. So they're a really cool species that you get to see. This is actually a bat that I saw one time that was just hanging out in one of the trees. So that was pretty cool too. So what I want to touch on with Bald Head, in regards to kind of the water piece and how it influences us, is Bald Head Island sits on top of an aquifer. So it's the Castle Hayne Aquifer. Maritime forests have to have fresh water. So they have this fresh water source sitting right underneath them. But what's interesting about Bald Head is that they're actually tapping in to that water source as their drinking supply. So the aquifer is this semi-confined fresh water source. So you'll see it's about, what they're tapping into is about at 55 feet below the surface. And there's wells all throughout the island. So our property is about this little area right here. And then the rest, if you've been out there, is golf course, houses, development. But they have production wells all throughout the site that are actually pulling the water up, sending it to get treated, and then providing it as a drinking source for the island, which you think that's a great thing, cool, like they've got their own water source. And there's about less than 200 people that call Bald Head Island their permanent residence, so you're like, okay, that's not that many people. But if you've been out there during the summer, that is not the case. So they have about 1,000 residences that can have people in them. So there's homes out there and they're about full during the summer. So think of all the people that you're having out there tapping into this natural aquifer that is very close to the river and very close to the Atlantic Ocean. So starting to think about the issues here, right? Okay, so the aquifer sits under our property, which is the maritime forest right here. So if you know how a maritime forest works, it's usually dunes, and then you'll have these low areas that are called swales. The swale communities are very wet. So think about when you have rainfall and it hits the top of the dunes are sand. Then you'll have water trickle down through the sand and it goes to these low-lying areas. The community in these low-lying areas need fresh water. So they need this freshwater source because those plants there will only exist if they have that source. Oh, why does this matter? I'll tell you. Here you go. So you'll see in some of these pictures, you're just picturing these really low-lying swales. And so you'll have areas like this in the forest that could be wet at all times. And the plants that live here, sable palms, palmetto, live oaks, they need this, source of fresh water to survive. And it does vary year to year. So we can go through a drought and the water levels will go down. We have high rainfall, they go up. But if you're actively pulling water out of a source, and say you go through a 5-year drought, that could be concerning. So it's just a beautiful, like these plants are only found in these communities. So if we don't actively protect our water sources, they will fail to exist. So what the reserve is doing in conjunction with the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, we also work really closely with the Bald Head Island Conservancy to monitor these wells. So we monitor the water levels in the aquifer to make sure that we're not pulling out too much so that these ecosystems can stay how they are. We started monitoring in 2015, and since 2015, this was the first year that we were able to go out and actually monitor these areas because there wasn't water in them. That was the first time that we have not had water in them, was this year, since 2015. So if you think back, it's been a pretty wet few years. We've had a lot of hurricanes, we've had a lot of water. So we were able to look at those, and what we found this year was actually that it's not from pulling from the water source. So we have a lot more of investigating and research to do, but from the first look at it, it is not specifically from extracting water from that aquifer, which is a good thing. But there's always more to come, but if you get a chance to go out here, please do. It's absolutely beautiful. And I brought some brochures as well, if you want to look at any of our 4 sites that we manage out of this office. But I also wanted to say how you can help. So I know we live in this place that's so beautiful and there's so much to do, but you really need to focus in on what can really make a difference, which is a big thing that Riverwatch does. Like, find where you can actually make an impact. So volunteer. Like within our organization, we have community science opportunities. You can go out, do the terrapin tally, which happens in the spring. Volunteer with local organizations. Even if it's not us, go out and find someone to volunteer with and help your local community. I also have an option of a reserve site steward. So these are trained volunteers that help me specifically with stewardship activities. It's me and Morgan, and we're just holding down the fort over here with all this stuff out on the sites. So if you ever want to come help pick up some trash or remove some crazy fort that someone built in a tree or whatever it may be, let me know, and then also educate others. So we provide all of these opportunities so that you can take this information and take it to your community. That's really the way that we, figure out anything. And then also donate to your local nonprofits. Big time. I am not a local nonprofit. I'm a state employee, so I'm not asking for money. But donate to your local nonprofits. We do have a nonprofit called the Friends of the Reserve. If you are interested in learning more about that program, it actually, all the money that goes to our nonprofit helps directly to support all the programs that I do, that Byron does, that we do on all these sites. And that's that QR code right there. And then with that, thank you. It's so cute. I'll put up, yeah, I was just going to put up our emails. If you want to contact us or have questions or don't know how to get to a site and want to go or need help, please reach out. My email, Byron's email, and we're at the Center for Marine Science, so we're always there holding down the fort, so come see us.
So yeah, if you guys have questions down here, can you hit the lights? Yeah, perfect.
Ooh.
Ooh, I know it's bright.
Hey. We should keep it on. We should keep it on my turtle.
I think so.
It's so cute.